Dawn hung heavy over the hillside, thick with mist that clung to the damp grass. Jack held the rope tight, the leather biting into his palm as he led the cow down the winding road. He stopped at the crossroads, the silence of the morning broken only by the shifting of hooves. From the shadows of an ancient oak, a man stepped forward. His eyes held a flicker of light that seemed to pulse in the gloom. He held out an open hand, 5 beans resting in his palm like polished emeralds. "Trade your cow for these, and your dreams will take root," the stranger whispered. The choice was made in a heartbeat. Jack surrendered the rope, turned, and walked back toward the cottage with nothing but the beans in his pocket. He found his mother waiting by the window. She took the handful of beans, her fingers trembling as she stared at the small, glowing objects. She did not speak. She simply turned and tossed them out into the dark garden, her shoulders sagging under the weight of a new, quiet despair. Jack watched her walk away, the air in the room turning cold with the silence of a house that had lost its last hope. The sound arrived before the light, a low, rhythmic creaking of wood against wood that rattled the window frames. Jack pushed open the door and stopped dead. Where the garden had been, a thick green stalk surged upward, twisting toward the heavens like a living tower. It vanished into the heavy gray blanket of the clouds. He pressed his palm against the surface. The bark was rough, warm, and pulsed with a steady, deep-seated life. He gripped a thick vine, hauled his weight off the ground, and began to climb. The cottage shrank. The hills flattened into a blur of brown and green. He pushed through the first layer of mist, the air turning thin and sharp against his lungs. Up here, the wind roared, pulling at his hair and stinging his skin. He didn't look down. He climbed until his muscles burned and the world below ceased to exist. Then, the gray light shattered. He pulled himself over a final, massive leaf and rolled onto solid ground. He was no longer on Earth. He stood on a floating island, surrounded by an endless expanse of blue, and ahead, the stone walls of a mountain-sized fortress hummed with a low, vibrating power. The castle doors stood ajar, each slab of granite tall enough to house a forest. Jack stepped inside. His own footsteps were swallowed by the vast, echoing silence of the hall. Everything here defied the laws of the world below. A table sat in the center of the room, wide as a village square, its surface scarred by heavy, jagged marks. Jack reached out, pressing his palm against the cold, unyielding stone of a pillar. It hummed with a deep, resonant vibration that traveled straight through his bones. His eyes caught a flicker of light near a massive, iron-barred cage. He moved closer, his breath hitching. A golden harp sat within the bars, its strings glowing with a soft, steady pulse. Beside it lay a pile of golden coins, each one the size of a dinner plate, and a hen that shimmered like polished metal. Every object radiated a power that made the air feel thick and electric. Jack stood still, his heart hammering against his ribs. The scale of these items made him feel like an insect in a predator's den. The dread began to set in, a cold weight settling in his stomach, as he realized that whoever owned these treasures was not far away. The floor beneath Jack jolted with such violence that he stumbled, his hands slapping against the cold stone to steady himself. A deep, grinding rumble vibrated through the foundation, dislodging flakes of dust from the vaulted ceiling. It was not an earthquake, it was a footfall. Another impact followed, heavier and closer, causing the golden coins to slide and clatter across the stone surface. Jack scrambled, dropping behind a pillar that felt more like a fortress wall. He pressed his back into the rough stone, holding his breath until his lungs ached. The air grew heavy, charged with the scent of unwashed earth and ancient smoke. Then, the sound arrived, a roar that shattered the silence of the hall. "Thief!" The voice was a physical blow, a boom of thunder that seemed to rattle the very air within the chamber. Jack squeezed his eyes shut, his heart drumming against his ribs like a trapped bird. A shadow, long and impossibly vast, stretched across the floor, creeping past the edge of his pillar. It blotted out the dim light, lingering for a terrifying second as it swept over his hiding spot. He stayed motionless, the silence that followed the roar more suffocating than the noise itself. The giant moved, and the floor groaned. Jack didn't wait. He lunged from behind the pillar, snatching the golden hen and the heavy bag of coins in one motion. The harp rattled as he pulled the lock, the sound ringing like a bell through the hall. A massive hand slammed into the stone inches from his boots, cracking the floor tiles. Jack sprinted. He didn't look back at the shadow that filled the doorway. He reached the edge of the floating island and threw himself onto the thick green vines. The descent was a blur of rushing air and burning friction. His skin pulled taut against the rough bark as he slid, his speed increasing with every foot of the drop. He hit the hillside hard, rolling into the dirt. He scrambled to his feet, fingers locking onto the heavy iron axe he had left by the base of the stalk. He swung. The blade bit deep into the vine. He pulled it free and swung again. The stalk shuddered, its massive weight groaning against the sky. With one final, desperate blow, the structure split. It toppled with an earth-shattering crash, sweeping across the hills and dragging the giant's roar into the deep, dark distance. Dust settled over the hillside, masking the wreckage of the fallen stalk. Jack stood in the silence, his mother rushing to his side, her hands gripping his shoulders. He opened his arms, presenting the hen and the harp. That evening, the cottage transformed. The harp played a melody that hummed through the walls, and the coins glowed in the hearthlight. Jack sat by the fire, watching sparks swirl into the chimney. The danger had passed, leaving behind a profound stillness. He looked into the flames, finally understanding the truth of the climb. Life was no longer a list of lacks, but a series of choices. He was still a dreamer, but now he knew that the greatest adventures began the moment he decided to leave the ground.